Hidden deep within the dense forest, a briefcase held a dark secret. But when a cunning raven discovered it, the fate of a relentless trial was about to drastically change, revealing an unexpected truth. The air in the dense forest was heavy, humid, and laden with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. Twisted roots and thick moss covered the ground, swallowing any trace of a path. There, beneath the shadow of a centuries-old oak, whose branches stretched like skeletal arms, it lay, the briefcase. It wasn't just any briefcase. Made of dark, worn leather with rusted clasps, it seemed to have been abandoned in haste, half buried among the protruding roots and camouflaged by a layer of dry leaves. No one would have found it by chance. No one except him. Corvus, a raven with plumage as black as the deepest night, and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, hovered above the treetops. His flight wasn't erratic. There was purpose in every beat of his powerful wings. His unusually bright eyes scanned the landscape below with supernatural acuity. He wasn't searching for food. He sought something more. An anomaly, a disruption in the natural order that his keen intelligence perceived. It was a subtle glint of rusted metal, almost imperceptible beneath the tangle of leaves that caught his attention. Corvus spiraled down, landing lightly on a nearby branch. He tilted his head, observing the briefcase with a curiosity that transcended animal instinct. There was something there, a contained energy, a secret that resonated with the tension he felt emanating from human civilization just a few kilometers away. With a graceful hop, he landed beside the briefcase. He tapped his beak against the aged leather, testing its resistance. The clasps were jammed, but not locked. Corvus tried to push, to pull, but the briefcase was too heavy for him to move. His instinct told him that what was inside was of utmost importance. He pecked at the surrounding leaves, unearthing the object a little more, revealing the initials engraved on the leather. D.M. An idea, more complex than a simple search for food or shelter, formed in his mind. He couldn't carry the entire briefcase, but perhaps he could extract something, or, more importantly, reveal its existence. His eyes fixed on a small gap between the lid and the body of the briefcase, where the leather had given way slightly. With patience and precision, Corvus began to work, using his strong beak to widen the opening. After a few minutes of concentrated effort, a small, folded, yellowed piece of paper became visible. Corvus gently pulled it out, holding it firmly in his beak. It was light, but the feel of its ancient texture and the faded ink stain on it seemed to vibrate with meaning. He knew, he felt, that this was the key. With the paper secure, Corvus took flight. Not towards his nest, not towards the open sky. His eyes were fixed in one direction, the city, the imposing stone building where human justice was being put to the test. He flew with a silent urgency, his supernatural intelligence guiding him through the forest, over the rooftops of houses, towards the epicenter of human tension. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. The judge, in her dark robe and severe demeanor, seemed like an unshakable marble statue. The Black Widow, as the media had dubbed her, sat in the defendant's box, appearing to have aged years during the trial. Her tear-filled eyes fixed on emptiness. The rookie defense attorney, Dr. Sophia Almeida, stood, her voice choked with exhaustion and despair. All her attempts to sow doubt had been in vain. Conventional evidence had failed. Conviction seemed inevitable. "Is there anything further to add, Dr. Almeida?" the judge asked, her voice cold and final, like the toll of a funeral bell. Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of failure crush her. "No, Your Honor, the defense has no more witnesses or evidence to present." It was at that exact moment, when hope seemed to have completely vanished, that a dark shape crossed the high courtroom window and an unexpected sound of beating wings filled the tense silence. All eyes turned to the source of the interruption. There, perched on the windowsill, was Corvus, the raven, with a small, yellowed piece of paper firmly clutched in his beak. His eyes, fixed on the courtroom, seemed to carry an urgent message, a newly discovered secret. A denser, almost palpable silence descended upon the courtroom. It wasn't the silence of resignation, but of disbelief. All eyes, previously fixed on the judge or the defendant's dejected figure, now turned to the windowsill, where Corvus, the raven, perched with an almost human dignity. His beak held the yellowed piece of paper like a treasure, and his black eyes seemed to pierce the soul of everyone present. The judge, who moments before had seemed unshakable, frowned. Her voice, though still firm, carried a tone of contained irritation. "Security, remove that bird immediately. I will not allow this courtroom to be turned into a circus." Two bailiffs moved hesitantly towards the window, but Corvus didn't stir. He merely tilted his head, as if assessing the situation, and then, with a swift and precise movement, released the paper. The small, yellowed rectangle floated gently in the air, falling with surprising lightness, not towards the floor, but directly onto the defense table, mere inches from Sophia's outstretched hand. Sophia, on the verge of collapse, felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if the universe, in her moment of greatest despair, had extended an improbable hand. Her eyes, previously blurred by defeat, now gleamed with a spark of something she dared not name: hope. She looked at the paper, then at the raven, who still watched her intently from the windowsill. "Your Honor." The prosecutor, Dr. Ricardo Mendez, began with a scoff. "With all due respect, we cannot allow a bird to interfere with proceedings. This is preposterous." The judge raised her hand, silencing him. Her eyes, though still skeptical, were fixed on the paper on Sophia's table. There was something in the precision of that act, in the way the raven had delivered the object, that prevented her from dismissing it entirely. "Dr. Almeida," she said, her voice now more cautious. "What is that?" Sophia, with trembling hands, reached out and picked up the paper. It was rough to the touch, with the unmistakable texture of something very old. She unfolded it carefully, feeling the weight of everyone's expectation in the room. The silence was so profound that one could hear their own heart beating. As the paper unfolded, elegant handwriting, though faded by time, revealed itself. It wasn't a letter nor a legal document. It was a map, a rudimentary, hand-drawn map, with ink marks that seemed decades old. There was an X marked at a specific point, and some almost illegible words written in Latin, which Sophia barely managed to decipher. Veritas in tenebris, the truth in the shadows. Her gaze flew from the map to the Black Widow, who for the first time in hours raised her head, her eyes fixed on the paper in Sophia's hands. There was an expression of confusion, but also a distant, almost imperceptible recognition. "Your Honor," Sophia finally managed to say, her voice choked with emotion and adrenaline. This isn't just any paper. It's a map, and I believe it points to the true location of the body, or more importantly, to the evidence that can exonerate my client." Prosecutor Mendez scoffed, but the judge did not interrupt him. Her eyes were fixed on Sophia, and a wrinkle of deep consideration appeared on her forehead. The raven, on the windowsill, let out a low caw, almost a murmur, as if approving the statement. "A map?" the judge repeated, her voice laden with skepticism, but also undeniable curiosity. "And how do you intend to prove its relevance?" "A map brought by a raven, Doctor. Almeida is an unusual argument." Sophia clutched the map in her hands, feeling the warmth of hope rekindle in her chest. "With your permission, Your Honor, I request a brief suspension. I need time to investigate this map. I believe it will lead us to the briefcase the raven found, and within it, to the evidence the defense never expected." The room erupted in murmurs. The idea of a trial being interrupted by a map brought by a raven was unprecedented. The judge banged her gavel forcefully, restoring order. Her eyes swept the room, pausing on the raven, then on the defendant, and finally on Sophia. The scales of justice, which seemed to tip irrevocably to one side, now trembled, uncertain. "Dr. Almeida," the judge declared, her voice now slower, more deliberate. "This is an extraordinary request based on extraordinary circumstances. However, justice demands that all avenues be explored. I grant a 24-hour suspension, but be warned, if this proves to be a hoax, the consequences for your career will be severe." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding uncontrollably. 24 hours. That was all she had. The raven, as if having fulfilled its mission, took flight from the window, disappearing into the grey sky, leaving behind a trail of mystery and a new, faint flicker of hope. The truth, after all, lay in the shadows, and Sophia knew she had to go find it. The judge's gavel echoed in the room, not as an end, but as a new beginning, an ultimatum. 24 hours. Sophia felt the weight of responsibility crush her, but also an electric current of adrenaline. Hope, which had seemed dead, now pulsed in her veins with an almost painful intensity. Prosecutor Mendez, visibly furious, stood up. "Your Honor, this is an outrage. We cannot allow a trial to be turned into a treasure hunt based on superstition." The judge, however, did not yield. Her eyes, previously fixed on Sophia, now swept the room, silencing any murmurs with her unquestionable authority. "Dr. Mendez, the court has granted a suspension. The decision is made. This court is in recess for 24 hours. Everyone dismissed." The room began to empty, with a subdued buzz. Journalists rushed to their phones, lawyers whispered, and bailiffs began to escort the defendant. Sophia remained motionless for a moment, the map still in her hands, the rough texture of the paper an anchor in the surreal reality that enveloped her. She looked at the defendant's box. The Black Widow, Ms. Elena Vasconcelos, finally raised her gaze and met hers. There was something in Elena's eyes, not gratitude, not relief, but a complex mixture of surprise and a shadow of terror. A terror Sophia couldn't decipher. "Dr. Almeida," an officer's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You need to leave. The courtroom will be closed." Sophia nodded, carefully putting the map into her briefcase. As she left the room, Prosecutor Mendez intercepted her, his face contorted in disdain. "You're playing with fire, Almeida, and when your evidence turns out to be a hoax, your career will be over, and your client, well, she'll get what she deserves." Sophia stared him down, fatigue giving way to steely determination. "The truth, Dr. Mendez, always finds a way, and I will find it." She stepped into the corridor, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the high windows, seeming like an invitation to the outside world. The air outside, however, felt heavier, charged with the urgency of her new mission. 24 hours. Where to begin? Her office was silent when she arrived, the chaos of papers and law books seeming like an ironic reminder of her previous routine. She spread the map on the table, studying every line, every mark. It was a simple drawing, yet detailed enough to be a reference. There was a winding river, a peculiar rock formation, and, of course, the X marked with a circle. The Latin words veritas in tenebris seemed to whisper to her. "DM," she murmured, remembering the initials on the briefcase. Could it be the owner's name? Or a clue? She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. Her first thought was of her mentor, a retired criminal lawyer known for his sharp mind and vast network of contacts. But he was ill. So, who? Her eyes landed on a business card forgotten in a corner of the desk. Dr. Gabriel Costa, geologist and mapping specialist. She had met him at a seminar on environmental forensic evidence. He was eccentric, but brilliant. Without hesitation, Sophia picked up the phone. "Dr. Costa, this is Sophia Almeida. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need your help, urgently. I found a map." Gabriel's voice on the other end of the line was calm, but with a touch of curiosity. "A map, Dr. Almeida? Interesting. Tell me more. I'm not one to refuse a good mystery." Sophia explained the situation in a few words, omitting the part about the raven for now. Fearing he would dismiss her as insane, she described the map, the markings, the urgency. Gabriel listened attentively. "I understand," he finally said. "It seems we have a challenge. Where are you? I can be there in an hour. Bring the map and any other information you might have. And prepare yourself, Dr. Almeida. The forest is not the courtroom. It guards its secrets with greater ferocity." Sophia felt a knot in her stomach. He was right. The forest. Where Mr. Vasconcelos's body was supposedly located, and where the briefcase had been hidden. She had only 24 hours to unravel a secret that had been buried for years. The truth in the shadows. She had to find it, not just for Elena, but for herself, to prove that justice sometimes needed a little help from the unexpected. She began to gather supplies, a flashlight, a compass, a first aid kit. Night was falling, and the forest would be a dark and unforgiving place. But the image of Eleanor's eyes and the promise she had made to herself propelled her forward. The raven had shown the way. Now it was up to her to walk it. The clock on the office wall showed almost 7 in the evening when a discreet knock sounded at the door. Sophia, who was reviewing the map for the 10th time, jumped, her heart racing. It was Gabriel. He entered, a middle-aged man with disheveled grey hair and glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. He wore a worn field jacket and carried a backpack that seemed to contain an explorer's arsenal. His eyes, however, were keen and full of an almost childlike curiosity. "Dr. Almeida," he greeted, his voice calm and somewhat melodic. "I got here as fast as I could. Where is our treasure?" Sophia gestured to the map spread on the table. "It's here, Dr. Costa, or at least the key to it." Gabriel approached, his eyes fixing on the yellowed paper. He took a magnifying glass from his jacket pocket and began to examine every detail, muttering to himself. "Interesting. Very interesting. The ink, the type of paper. Definitely old. And these marks. A river, a rock formation. It's not a topographical map, but it's surprisingly accurate for a hand-drawn sketch." Sophia, anxious, waited for him to finish his initial analysis. "What do you think? Is it authentic? And more importantly, is it possible to locate that X?" Gabriel looked up, a discreet smile playing on his lips. "Authentic? Hard to say without a more in-depth analysis, but its age is undeniable. As for the location, yes, I believe so. You see, Dr. Almeida, nature has its own fingerprints. That rock formation, for example, is quite peculiar, and the curve of that river. With a good modern topographical map and some satellite coordinates, we can triangulate the area." He pointed to the Latin words, "Veritas in tenebris," the truth in the shadows. "A beautiful choice for a treasure map, don't you think?" "It's more than a treasure, Dr. Costa," Sophia corrected, her voice laden with seriousness. "It's a woman's freedom." She finally decided to tell him about the raven, watching his reaction. And it was brought by a raven directly to the defense table in the middle of the trial. Gabriel blinked, but didn't show the skepticism Sophia expected. Instead, a gleam of fascination appeared in his eyes. "A raven, you say? Fascinating. They are remarkably intelligent creatures. Perhaps nature has its own messengers. That only makes the mystery more intriguing." He took a tablet from his backpack and began typing rapidly. "I need some information about the area. Which forest are we talking about?" Where was Mr. Vasconcelos's body supposedly hidden? Sophia provided the details: the Black Forest, a dense and little explored area on the outskirts of the city. Gabriel cross-referenced the old map's information with satellite images and modern topographical maps. The tablet screen glowed with overlays of lines and points. "Aha!" he exclaimed, pointing to a spot on the screen. "Here it is. The rock formation matches, and the river's curve. The X is in a densely wooded area, a bit off the main trails. It's a difficult-to-access area, which would explain why the body was never found, if it were there." Sophia felt a shiver. The precision was chilling. And the initials DM. They were on the briefcase the Raven found. Could they be the owner of the map or the briefcase? "It's a strong possibility," Gabriel nodded. "It could be a signature or an indication of ownership. We'll have to find out. The location is about a 2-hour drive from here and then a good hike. If we leave now, we'll get there before midnight. The full moon might help us, but the forest will be treacherous." Sophia looked out the window. The night was dark and starless, but the urgency was palpable. 24 hours. Time was running out. "Let's go," she said, grabbing the backpack she had prepared. "We don't have a minute to lose. The truth in the shadows awaits us." Gabriel smiled, a glint of adventure in his eyes. "I always wanted to be a treasure hunter, Dr. Almeida, but I never imagined the treasure would be justice." He put the tablet in his backpack, grabbed a powerful flashlight, and opened the office door. "Prepare yourself, Dr. Almeida. The forest does not forgive the unprepared." They stepped out into the cold night, the silence of the street contrasting with the whirlwind of thoughts in Sophia's mind. The journey to the truth was just beginning, and she knew it would be the most dangerous of her life. Gabriel's car, a robust SUV adapted for rough terrain, cut through the darkness of the secondary road. The illuminated dashboard cast a green glow on their faces as the urban landscape gave way to open fields and eventually the imposing silhouette of the Black Forest on the horizon. Sophia was tense, her fingers tapping on an imaginary steering wheel. Gabriel beside her seemed strangely at ease, humming an inaudible tune as he adjusted the GPS on his tablet. "Don't worry, Dr. Almeida," he said, noticing her nervousness. "The forest is a living organism. It can be frightening, but it's also full of wonders, and secrets, of course." Sophia sighed. "It's the secrets part that worries me, Dr. Costa. And the time. We have less than 23 hours now." "Time is a tyrant indeed," Gabriel agreed without taking his eyes off the road. "But patience is the key to unraveling nature's mysteries, and by extension, human mysteries. Those initials, DM, intrigue me. They might be the most valuable clue we have besides the map." "Yes, DM." Sophia repeated, the image of the briefcase surfacing in her mind. Who could it be? The owner of the briefcase? Or the map? Or perhaps the body? The last possibility made her shiver. "Anything is possible," Gabriel replied calmly. "But let's stick to what's concrete for now. The map, it's our guide. And the forest, well, it's our battlefield." The road became narrower and bumpier. Trees began to rise, forming a dark green tunnel that swallowed the little light remaining from the night sky. The air grew colder, humid, and smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. The sound of tires on gravel was the only noise besides the engine. "We're reaching the access point," Gabriel announced, slowing down. "There's no marked trail to where the X is. We'll have to make our own way." Sophia felt a chill in her stomach. The forest seemed like an impenetrable wall, its shadows dancing with the headlights. She thought of Elena, alone in her cell, the fragile hope she placed in Sophia. She thought of the Raven, the improbable messenger who had unleashed all this. The car stopped in a small clearing where the road ended abruptly. Gabriel turned off the engine, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. broken only by the distant croaking of frogs and the rustling of leaves. "From here, it's on foot," Gabriel said, grabbing his backpack and a powerful flashlight. "Stay close. Visibility will be minimal, even with the full moon hiding behind the clouds." Sophia grabbed her own backpack, the weight of the supplies a tangible reminder of the mission's seriousness. She turned on her flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the darkness, revealing the density of the vegetation. The trees were tall and ancient, their twisted branches resembling claws. "Remember, Dr. Almeida," Gabriel continued, his voice a little graver now, "the forest is not the courtroom. There are no rules, only nature, and it can be relentless, but it can also reveal the truth. Veritas in tenebris, isn't it? The truth in the shadows." He pointed his flashlight towards the entrance of the woods, a tangle of bushes and vines that seemed to swallow the light. "Let's go. The clock isn't stopping." Sophia nodded, swallowing hard. Each step she took into the darkness felt like a leap into the unknown. The forest's humidity enveloped her, and the scent of earth and wildlife filled her lungs. She felt the weight of responsibility, the fear of failure, but also a fierce determination. The truth was there, somewhere, and she would find it. For Eleanor, for justice, and to prove that sometimes the unexpected is the only way. They entered the black forest, the shadows closing behind them, swallowing them whole. The flashlight beams were a fragile illusion, a pair of flickering rays that barely scratched the primordial darkness of the black forest. Sophia felt the air heavy and damp, saturated with the pungent smell of wet earth, moss, and something more, something wild and untamed. Every step was a challenge. Tree roots, thick as sleeping snakes, formed traps on the muddy ground, and vines hung like curtains, forcing them to bend and push their way through. "Keep your eyes on the ground, Dr. Almeida," Gabriel instructed, his voice a grave whisper that seemed to be absorbed by the woods. He went ahead, using a machete to cut through the denser vegetation, the metallic sound echoing strangely in the silence. "It's easy to twist an ankle here and pay attention to the sounds. The forest speaks, if we know how to listen." Sophia tried to follow the advice, but her senses were overwhelmed. The constant rustling of leaves, the snapping of branches underfoot, the buzzing of invisible insects, everything mingled into an oppressive symphony. She felt her heart pound in her chest, a mix of adrenaline and fear. The image of Elena, pale and desperate, was the only beacon in her mind, preventing her from succumbing to panic. "Have you been in a forest like this before, Dr. Costa?" Sophia asked, her voice a little breathless. "Many times," he replied, without turning around. "I'm a geologist, Dr. Almeida. My maps often lead me to places where civilization hasn't yet dared to tread. But this one has a particular energy, almost ancestral." He stopped suddenly, raising his flashlight to a specific point. "Look here, moss growing only on one side of the trees. That indicates the predominant wind direction and, by extension, can help us stay on course, even if the GPS fails under the dense canopy." Sophia looked at the moss, a vibrant green against the dark bark, and felt a pang of admiration for Gabriel's calm and knowledge. He was an improbable, yet essential guide. They continued, with each meter the forest seeming to close in even more around them. The trees grew older, their trunks twisted and covered with lichen, their canopies so dense that moonlight, even when the clouds parted for an instant, barely managed to penetrate. The air grew colder, and Sophia felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold. It was the feeling of being in a place where time seemed to have stopped, where ancient secrets lay buried. "The map indicates that the X is near a peculiar rock formation," Gabriel said, consulting his tablet, which showed an overlay of the old map with satellite coordinates. "We still have a good way to go. The vegetation is denser than satellite images suggested. That's both good and bad. Good because it protected the site longer. Bad because it makes our journey slower." Suddenly, a sharp, distant sound cut through the silence. A howl. Sophia stopped, her blood freezing in her veins. "What was that?" she whispered, her flashlight trembling in her hands. Gabriel also stopped, listening intently. "A coyote, perhaps, or a lone wolf. Don't worry, they usually avoid humans. But it's a reminder that we're not alone here." He resumed their path, but Sophia noticed his pace had become a little more cautious. Time seemed to stretch and contract. Hours passed, but felt like minutes amidst that labyrinthine darkness. Exhaustion began to settle in Sophia's muscles, and the humidity seemed to penetrate her bones. She tripped on a root and almost fell, but Gabriel caught her arm. "Careful," he said, his voice soft. "We're getting close. The rock formation should be just ahead. I feel the change in the terrain. The ground is becoming stonier." They advanced for a few more minutes, and then the vegetation began to thin slightly, revealing darker, more massive shapes ahead. Sophia's and Gabriel's flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a wall of dark, irregular rock covered in moss and ivy that rose abruptly from the forest floor. It was imposing, almost menacing. "Here it is," Gabriel murmured, a triumphant tone in his voice. "The peculiar rock formation. The X is somewhere around here, the truth in the shadows." Sophia looked at the rock, feeling a mix of relief and a new wave of apprehension. They had reached the location, but now the real challenge began, finding the evidence Elena needed, hidden somewhere within that mass of stone and vegetation, under the watchful eye of the Black Forest. The clock continued to tick, and with each passing second, Elena's hope diminished. They were close, but the truth was still well hidden. The light from Sophia's and Gabriel's flashlights danced over the irregular surface of the rock formation, revealing a tapestry of moss, lichen, and ivy that covered it like an ancient skin. The rock was massive, with deep crevices and protrusions that cast ghostly shadows. The air around it felt denser, charged with a stillness that bordered on the sacred. "It's even more imposing than I imagined," Sophia murmured, her voice almost a whisper. She felt a pang of hope, but also the overwhelming pressure of time. Where exactly would the X be here? Gabriel swept the rock with his flashlight, his trained eyes examining every detail. "The map is old and doesn't have the precision of a modern GPS. The X marks the general area. We'll have to look for signs that something was hidden or disturbed, a larger crevice, perhaps a small cave, or even a spot where vegetation was manipulated." He approached the base of the rock, running his hand over a moss-covered surface. "The humidity here is constant. Anything metal would be corroded, unless it was very well protected." Sophia began to search the base of the formation, illuminating every recess, every clump of bushes growing in the crevices. The smell of damp earth and cold stone was strong. She felt the weariness in her bones, but adrenaline propelled her. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every rustle of leaves made her jump. "Remember the raven, Dr. Almeida?" Gabriel said, his voice echoing slightly among the rocks. "He found the briefcase. Ravens are intelligent, but they aren't diggers. It's likely the briefcase was in a location accessible to him, perhaps in a crevice or under a natural shelter, but still well hidden from human eyes." Gabriel's observation made sense. Sophia raised her flashlight, focusing on the higher crevices, the small plateaus and the ledges. The briefcase wouldn't be buried deep. They worked in silence for a while, the only sound being the rustling of their clothes and the occasional snap of branches underfoot. Frustration began to set in. The rock formation was vast, and every crevice seemed identical to the last. Sophia's mental clock hammered. Less than 22 hours. "Nothing," Sophia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's like looking for a needle in a giant haystack. What if the map is wrong? What if someone already found it?" Gabriel stopped. His flashlight pointed at a specific part of the rock, a little higher up. "Don't despair, Dr. Almeida. The forest guards its secrets zealously, but it also reveals them to those who know how to look, see there. Sophia followed Gabriel's beam of light. He was pointing to a narrow crevice, almost imperceptible, about 2 meters off the ground. The crevice was partially obscured by a dense curtain of ivy and some twisted bushes. "What is it?" Sophia asked, feeling a shiver of anticipation. "The ivy seems to have been disturbed," Gabriel replied, his voice tense. "And there's a small space between the rocks, a kind of natural niche. It's the kind of place where an intelligent animal like a raven might have noticed something unusual." He tried to reach the crevice, but it was too high. "I need something to climb on. Or perhaps—" He looked around, and his eyes landed on a fallen log, thick and sturdy a few meters away. That might work. With a combined effort, they dragged the heavy log to the base of the crevice. Gabriel positioned it carefully, ensuring it was stable. "I'll climb up. You illuminate." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding. She aimed her flashlight at the crevice, while Gabriel, with the agility of an experienced climber, ascended the log. He stretched, carefully pushing aside the ivy. "There's something here," he exclaimed, his voice muffled. It's a briefcase, partially covered by dry leaves and moss. It's stuck." Sophia felt an electric shock run through her body. It was real. The briefcase, the evidence. Gabriel strained, pulling and twisting. The sound of old wood and dry leaves mingled with the creaking of the briefcase being dislodged. Finally, with a last tug, he succeeded. The briefcase fell into his hands, and he carefully descended from the log. He placed it on the ground under the combined light of the 2 flashlights. It was an aged leather briefcase, dark, with the initials DM engraved in faded brass. It was dirty with earth and dampness, but intact. Sophia knelt, her fingers trembling as she touched the cold leather. "DM," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We found it. Gabriel, we really found it." Gabriel nodded, a tired but victorious smile on his face. "The truth in the shadows, Dr. Almeida. And now, what do we do with it?" The clock continued to tick, but for a brief moment, under the dark canopy of the Black Forest, hope shone brighter than ever. The briefcase was in their hands, but what did it contain? And would it be enough to save Elena? The mystery was about to be unraveled. Sophia looked at the briefcase, her heart pounding in her chest. The initials DM shone faintly under the flashlight beams. Dr. Marcos Dantas, the man whose disappearance had triggered the entire trial. Could the briefcase belong to him? And if so, what would he have hidden here? "It's locked," Gabriel observed, examining the rusted metal clasp. "And it seems to be an old mechanism. We can't force it. We need a key or a delicate tool to open it without damaging the contents." Sophia felt a wave of frustration, so close, yet so far. "We don't have time to go back and get tools. Elena will be convicted if we don't have this in court tomorrow." "Calm down, Dr. Almeida," Gabriel said, his voice soft but firm. He carefully picked up the briefcase. "I'm a geologist, not a bank robber, but I have some skills with mechanisms, and I always carry a basic emergency kit." He opened a small pouch in his backpack and pulled out a set of small, thin, precise tools. "Let's see what we have here." He knelt beside Sophia, positioning the briefcase under the strongest light. With fine tweezers and a small lever, he began to manipulate the clasp. Sophia held her breath, watching every movement, the forest silence amplifying the faint click and creak of the metal. Minutes dragged like hours. The tension was almost unbearable. Suddenly, a small click echoed. The clasp sprang open. Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Gabriel opened the briefcase with extreme caution. Inside, there was a layer of waterproof fabric, protecting the contents from moisture. He removed the fabric, revealing what lay within. It wasn't money, nor jewels. It was a leather-bound diary, carefully preserved, and a small, surprisingly modern digital recording device, alongside some documents sealed in plastic bags. Gabriel picked up the diary first. "It seems to be a diary," he murmured, flipping through the yellowed pages. "The dates are recent, and the handwriting. It's Dr. Marcos Dantes's." Sophia felt an electric shock. Marcos Dantes's own diary. She picked up the diary, her fingers trembling. On the first page, elegant but hurried handwriting read, "If anyone finds this, know that I was not murdered. I chose to disappear, and unfortunately, I needed a scapegoat." Sophia read the words aloud, her voice choked with disbelief. He wasn't murdered. He disappeared of his own free will. Gabriel took the diary back, turning the pages. "It seems so. And he mentions a scapegoat. This is explosive, Dr. Almeida." Sophia felt a wave of dizziness. Elena was not a murderer. She hadn't hidden a body. Marcos Dantes had faked his own disappearance and, worse, had framed Elena for it. The diary detailed a complex plan to escape a colossal debt and threats from a cartel, and how he had manipulated evidence to make Elena appear guilty, knowing that her Black Widow reputation would make her an easy target. The recording device contained audios of Marcos Dantes explaining his motives and confessing the plan. "It's the evidence," Sophia whispered, tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief and a cold fury. "It's everything we need. He framed her. He framed her." Gabriel closed the briefcase, his eyes fixed on hers. "We have to go back, Dr. Almeida, now, as fast as possible. This briefcase not only saves your client, it exposes a hoax that will shake the country." The clock was still ticking, but hope was no longer a fragile flame. It was a blaze, fueled by the truth that had finally emerged from the shadows of the Black Forest. Elena's fate and Sophia's reputation now rested in the hands of that evidence. The race against time had become a race for justice. Sophia closed the briefcase with a decisive click, the sound echoing in the forest's quietude. Her eyes, previously tear-filled with relief, now burned with fierce determination. The cold fury she felt for Eleanor, for herself, for the entire charade, was a powerful engine. "There's not a second to lose, Gabriel," she said, her voice firm, but still with a contained tremor. "We need to get out of here. Now." Gabriel nodded, already putting away his tools. He picked up the briefcase with reverent care, as if holding a sacred artifact. "The car is a good distance away. The walk will be fast, but difficult in the dark." "It doesn't matter," Sophia replied, already turning and beginning to push her way through the dense vegetation. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins, dispelling her fatigue. Every leaf that brushed her face, every branch that snapped underfoot, seemed like a reminder of the urgency. The Black Forest, which had once seemed an oppressive labyrinth, was now just an obstacle to overcome. They moved with renewed speed, their flashlights dancing ahead, carving a narrow path in the darkness. The night silence was broken only by the sound of their hurried footsteps and their ragged breaths. Sophia felt the weight of Marcos Dantes's words in her mind. "I chose to disappear, and unfortunately, I needed a scapegoat." The cruelty of the confession was shocking, but the clarity it brought was liberating. She was a victim of calculated and perverse manipulation. "What will we do when we get there?" Gabriel asked, his voice a little hoarse from the haste. "Straight to the courthouse?" Sophia shook her head. "No. First, we need to ensure the safety of this briefcase, and then we need to think about strategy. We can't just drop it in the judge's lap without a plan. The prosecution will try to discredit everything." The image of the relentless judge and the astute prosecutor came to her mind. They wouldn't accept this twist easily. The credibility of the evidence would be questioned, the way it was found, everything. Sophia knew she would have to be impeccable. We'll have to present this as the undeniable truth it is, she continued, more to herself than to Gabriel. The diary, the recording, it's the man's own confession. There's no way to dispute its authenticity. They finally broke through the forest barrier, emerging onto the dirt road where Gabriel's car was parked. The relief of seeing the vehicle was immense. Gabriel hastily opened the trunk and stored the briefcase with the utmost care, as if it were made of glass. The drive back to the city was a blur of thoughts and plans. Sophia watched the forest's darkness recede in the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of exhaustion and euphoria. The night landscape sped by, but her mind was fixed on tomorrow. "We need a safe place for the briefcase," Sophia said, breaking the silence. "And I need a few hours to review the diary and documents, and to prepare my argument. I can't go to court without being completely ready." Gabriel nodded. "We can go to my apartment. It's discreet and secure. No one will follow us there." Upon reaching the city, the streets were deserted. Dawn was beginning to insinuate itself on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of grey and purple. Gabriel's apartment was simple, but cozy. He brewed strong coffee while Sophia, with trembling hands, opened the briefcase again. Under the living room light, she began to leaf through Marcos Dantas's diary. Each page was a revelation, a deeper dive into the mind of a desperate and calculating man. He detailed the cartel's threats, the pressure of debts, the idea of faking his own death to escape it all. And with chilling coldness, he described how he had planted the evidence that would incriminate Elena, exploiting her Black Widow fame to make the story more credible. Sophia felt a knot in her throat. The injustice was glaring. Eleanor, a woman already marked by tragedy, was about to be destroyed by such an elaborate lie. But now, the truth was in her hands. She picked up the small recording device. Gabriel, who was more technologically adept, connected it to a small audio player he owned. Marcos Dantas's voice filled the room, calm and articulate, explaining every step of his plan, every motive, every manipulation. It was the definitive confession, the irrefutable proof. The tears Sophia had held back for so long finally fell. They weren't tears of despair, but of a deep and overwhelming sense of justice. She had the evidence, she had the truth, and tomorrow she would present it to the world. "He won't escape unpunished," Sophia whispered, her voice choked with emotion and exhaustion. "Elena will be free, and he will have to face the consequences of his actions." Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Dr. Almeida. You found the truth. Now let's make sure it's heard." The clock on the wall read 4:30 a.m. The courtroom would reopen in a few hours. Sophia knew she wouldn't sleep. There was too much to do, too much to prepare. But for the first time in days, hope wasn't just a distant possibility. It was a palpable certainty, a precious weight in her hands. The race for justice was about to enter its final phase, and Sophia Almeida was ready to fight. The hours that followed were a blur of caffeine, frantic notes, and an exhaustion that bordered on hallucination. Sophia didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every word of Marcos Dantas's diary was absorbed, analyzed, memorized. She underlined passages, drew timelines, connected points that had once seemed random. The recorded confession was played repeatedly, Marcos's voice echoing in the quiet of Gabriel's apartment, each syllable carving the truth into Sophia's mind. "He planned every detail," Sophia murmured to herself, her eyes red and swollen but her mind sharper than ever. From the disappearance, the simulation of an accident, to the way he framed Elena. It's a calculated cruelty. Gabriel, who had dozed for a few hours on the sofa, woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the pale light of dawn invading the room. He found Sophia sitting at the table, surrounded by papers, with the briefcase open and the diary in her hands. "How are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sophia looked up, a feverish glint in her eyes. "I'm ready, more than ready. I have the evidence, Gabriel. I have the weapon that will dismantle this entire charade." She gestured to the documents. The diary details everything: the debts, the cartel's threats, the idea of faking his own death, and the recording. It's the cherry on top. He explains how he planted the evidence against Elena, using her reputation to make the story credible. Gabriel approached, looking over her shoulder. It's undeniable, but the prosecution will fight. They'll try to say it's forged, that it's a setup. I know, Sophia nodded, closing the diary with a soft click. And that's why my argument has to be impeccable. I'll present the chain of custody, the Ravens' testimony, yes, the Ravens, and the forensic analysis. We'll have to demand for the diary and the recording. There's no way to dispute the authenticity of a man confessing his own crime. The sun was already high when they left Gabriel's apartment. The city slowly woke up, traffic beginning to form, people rushing to their jobs. For Sophia, the world seemed to spin in slow motion, each step towards the courthouse laden with immense weight. Gabriel carried the briefcase, protecting it like a treasure. As they approached the Palace of Justice, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones pointed at anyone who seemed relevant. Elena's name and the nickname Black Widow were whispered, shouted, plastered across newspaper headlines. Sophia felt the stares on her, the camera flashes momentarily blinding her. She held her head high, the determination on her face an impenetrable armor. Dr. Almeida, any comment on the final day of the trial? A reporter shouted. The truth will be revealed, Sophia replied, her voice firm, before being pulled by Gabriel into the building. The corridor leading to the courtroom was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Sophia saw the prosecutor, Dr. Ricardo Mendez, talking with his team, a confident smile on his face. He still didn't know. Upon entering the courtroom, an almost reverent silence fell over the crowd. Elena sat at the defense table, pale, her eyes fixed on emptiness, hope almost extinguished. When her eyes met Sophia's, a flicker of surprise and a faint spark of what seemed to be hope ignited in them. Sophia gave an almost imperceptible nod, a silent promise. Judge Alana Vasconcelos entered, her dark robe and severe expression dominating the room. Order in the court. The gavel struck and everyone sat down. We are on the final day of the argument phase, the judge began, her voice resonating. Dr. Almeida, does the defense have any further final considerations before we proceed to closing arguments? Sophia stood up, her heart pounding in her chest, but her voice surprisingly calm. Yes, Your Honor. The defense has an urgent motion to present new evidence that is crucial and completely changes the course of this case. A murmur ran through the room. Prosecutor Mendez stood up, his confident expression replaced by a frown. Objection, Your Honor. New evidence at this stage of the trial is highly unusual and frankly suspicious. The defense has had ample time to present all its proofs. Your Honor, Sophia interjected, her voice gaining strength, this evidence was only discovered in the last few hours through an extraordinary circumstance. It is the truth we have been searching for, and it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt the innocence of my client, Elena Dantas. Judge Vasconcelos looked at Sophia. Her eyes narrowed. She was a woman of rules, but also of justice. Dr. Almeida, the court is willing to hear, but let it be clear, if this is a maneuver to delay the process, the consequences will be severe. Present your evidence. Sophia nodded, turning to Gabriel, who approached with the briefcase in hand. The object, once hidden in the forest, was now there, center stage, about to unravel a mystery that would shake everyone. The air in the courtroom became dense, the anticipation palpable. Sophia opened the briefcase, revealing the diary and the small recording device. The game had changed. Sophia raised the dark, leather-bound diary, holding it with reverence, like a sacred artifact. Beside it, the small digital recorder rested, discreet but loaded with explosive truth. A collective whisper swept through the room, quickly turning into an uncontrollable buzz. Reporters stirred, cameras clicked incessantly, and even the security guards seemed tense. "Order in the court!" Judge Vasconcelos's voice cut through the air, her gavel striking forcefully. "Silence! Dr. Almeida, explain yourself. What evidence is this, and how was it obtained?" Prosecutor Ricardo Mendez was on his feet, his face red with indignation. "The defense is attempting a desperate maneuver. We cannot allow evidence of dubious origin to be introduced at this crucial moment." Sophia turned to the judge, the calm in her voice contrasting with the surrounding chaos. "Your Honor, I understand Dr. Mendez's objection, but I assure you that the origin of this evidence, though extraordinary, is irrefutable." These are the words of Marcos Dantas himself. This is his diary, where he details his plan to fake his own death and incriminate my client, Elena Dantas. And this, she pointed to the recorder, is his confession, recorded on audio, explaining every step of his deception. A muffled cry escaped Elena. She brought her hands to her mouth, her tear-filled eyes fixed on the objects on the defense table. A spark of hope, long extinguished, rekindled in her gaze. "And how did the defense obtain these items, Dr. Almeida?" the judge asked, her voice laden with skepticism, but also undeniable curiosity. Sophia took a deep breath. This was the hardest part to explain. "Your Honor, this evidence was found in the forest, in a remote and hidden location, by an unusual witness." She paused, searching for the right words. "A raven, Your Honor. A raven guided us to the briefcase where these items were hidden. It found it and somehow alerted us to its existence." A chorus of nervous laughter and incredulous murmurs erupted in the room. Prosecutor Mendez couldn't suppress a scoff. "A raven, Dr. Almeida. Are you suggesting a bird is your key witness? This is a circus. The defense is mocking the court." "Objection, Your Honor," Sophia retorted, her voice firm. "While the circumstance may seem unusual, the intelligence and observational abilities of ravens are well documented. The fact is that the raven led us directly to the briefcase, which was buried and camouflaged. Without it, we would never have found the truth." Judge Vasconcelos banged her gavel again, the dry sound echoing in the silence that followed. "Dr. Almeida, the court cannot base its decisions on fairy tales. However, the nature of the evidence you describe is serious enough to warrant analysis. Dr. Mendez, your objection is noted, but the court will allow Dr. Almeida to present the chain of custody and the relevance of this evidence." Prosecutor Mendez clenched his fists, but nodded, knowing the judge had made her decision. "Your Honor," Sophia continued, seizing the opening, "the briefcase was found by myself and Mr. Gabriel Costa, who can testify about the exact location and conditions in which we found it. Since then, it has been in our custody and kept secure. We demand an immediate forensic analysis of the diary and the recording device to confirm their authenticity. I am certain that Marcos Dantas's fingerprints will be found in the diary, and his voice is unmistakable in the recording." She then opened the diary to the first page, where Marcos Dantas's handwriting was unmistakable. "Here, Your Honor, Marcos Dantas details the cartel's threats, the debts that suffocated him, and the idea of faking his own death to escape. He describes with chilling coldness how he planned to incriminate Elena, exploiting her Black Widow reputation to make his story more credible." The silence in the room was almost absolute, broken only by the gasping breaths of some present. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Sophia, who now held the small recorder. "And here, Your Honor," Sophia said, her voice choked with emotion, but still strong, "we have the definitive confession. Marcos Dantas's voice, explaining every step of his plan, every motive, every manipulation. It is the irrefutable proof of his deception and Elena Dantas's innocence. Judge Vasconcelos looked at the diary, then at the recorder, and finally at Elena, whose face was bathed in silent tears of relief and shock. The relentless judge, known for her rigid demeanor, seemed momentarily shaken. "Dr. Almeida," the judge said, her voice softer than before, "the court grants the motion for the introduction of this new evidence. However, its authenticity must be established beyond a shadow of a doubt. I order that the diary and the recording device be immediately taken for forensic analysis. While we await the results, the court will hear Mr. Gabriel Costa's testimony regarding the discovery of the briefcase." The gavel struck again, but this time the sound was not of finality, but of a new beginning. The game had changed, and the truth, finally, was about to be revealed. The race for justice was far from over, but for the first time, Sophia felt that victory was within reach. The buzz in the courtroom subsided as Gabriel Costa, with the now empty briefcase in the hands of a bailiff, walked towards the witness stand. He appeared calm, but Sophia knew that beneath that facade, adrenaline was coursing. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, his voice firm and clear. "Mr. Costa," Sophia began, her voice echoing in the expectant silence, "could you please recount to the court the exact circumstances of the discovery of the briefcase that contains the evidence we have just presented?" Gabriel nodded, turning slightly to the judge and then to the jury. "Yes, Dr. Almeida. Last night I was in my apartment when a raven, the same raven that has been seen circling the courthouse in recent days, appeared at my window. It seemed agitated, making unusual sounds, and had what appeared to be a piece of dark fabric in its beak." A murmur of skepticism ran through the room, but Judge Vasconcelos maintained order with a stern look. "And what happened next, Mr. Costa?" Sophia asked, guiding him. "I followed it," Gabriel continued, his voice gaining conviction. "It seemed irrational at the time, but there was something in its urgency. It flew into the forest on the outskirts of the city, and I followed on foot. It continued to guide me, flying ahead, landing and waiting, as if to ensure I was keeping up." He paused, his eyes fixed on Sophia. "It led me to a dense area of the forest, a place I never would have found on my own. There, it began to peck at the ground at a specific spot and make its calls. It was then that I realized something was buried there. I started digging with my hands and soon found the briefcase. It was camouflaged, covered by leaves and earth." "And what did you do upon finding the briefcase, Mr. Costa?" "I opened it," Gabriel replied. "And inside, I found the diary and the digital recorder. I immediately realized the gravity of the discovery and contacted Dr. Almeida." Prosecutor Mendez stood up, a scoffing smile on his face. "Mr. Costa, are you telling us that a bird, a raven, led you to crucial evidence in a murder case? Isn't that a little convenient?" "Objection, Your Honor. Dr. Mendez is attempting to discredit the witness with insinuations," Sophia interjected. "Sustained," Judge Vasconcelos said. "Dr. Mendez, stick to the facts." "With all due respect, Your Honor, the facts here are that a raven acted as a detective," Mendez retorted, ignoring the judge for a moment. "Mr. Costa, do you have any experience with animal training? Are you an ornithologist? How can you be so sure the raven was guiding and not just flying?" "I am not an ornithologist, Dr. Mendez," Gabriel replied, maintaining his calm. "But the way it acted, its persistence, the fact that it led me directly to the exact spot where the briefcase was hidden. It wasn't a coincidence, it was intentional. Intentional. A bird acting with the intent to solve a crime." "That's absurd," Mendez exclaimed, gesturing to the jury. "The defense is trying to make us believe a fantastic story to distract from the lack of concrete evidence against Ms. Dantas." "Dr. Mendez, that's enough." Judge Vasconcelos banged her gavel forcefully. "The court is interested in the facts, not in speculations about the intellectual capacity of birds. Mr. Costa found the briefcase. What matters now is its content and its authenticity. The chain of custody has been established from the moment of discovery until its presentation to the court. The evidence will be analyzed." The judge turned to Sophia. "Dr. Almeida, any other questions for this witness?" "No, Your Honor, the defense is satisfied." "Dr. Mendez?" "No, Your Honor," he replied, still visibly irritated. "Mr. Costa, you may step down," the judge instructed. As Gabriel stepped down from the stand, Elena, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, finally allowed a tear to roll down her face. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of a relief so profound it left her breathless. Hope, once a faint thread, was now a vibrant flame. "Bailiff," Judge Vasconcelos continued, her voice authoritative, "ensure that the diary and the recording device are immediately taken to the State Forensic Laboratory for analysis. I want a complete report on the authenticity of the materials, fingerprints, and the verification of the voice in the recording. This is a matter of extreme urgency. The court will go into recess until we have the results. I expect them to be available by tomorrow morning." The bailiff picked up the items from the defense table with gloved hands, placing them into transparent evidence bags. The courtroom, previously a cauldron of emotions, was now in a state of suspension. Everyone knew that the final verdict would depend on what those two objects would reveal. "The court is in recess," the judge declared, banging her gavel one last time. "Everyone is dismissed until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." The sound of the gavel was the signal for the room to erupt into controlled chaos. Reporters rushed out, microphones in hand, eager to broadcast the unbelievable twist. Sophia approached Elena, who was still seated, her hands trembling. "Elena," Sophia said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We did it. The truth is coming to light." Elena raised her tear-filled eyes to Sophia, a faint, trembling smile appearing on her lips. I can't believe it. Marcos, he really did that." Sophia nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility lessen slightly. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The truth, however strange the way it came to light, would finally have its chance. The raven, the improbable messenger, had played its part. Now it was the turn of science and justice. Judge Vasconcelos's gavel echoed through the room, but this time it wasn't a sign of closure, but of a pause laden with expectation. The Black Widow's face, previously marked by resignation, now displayed a mixture of shock and an almost painful hope. "We did it. I can't believe it. Marcos, he really did that." Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. The realization slowly dawned, revealing the depth of the betrayal. "He did," Sophia confirmed, feeling the weight of responsibility lessen slightly. Gabriel joined them, a look of relief on his face. "That was close," he murmured, and Sophia nodded, knowing the last few hours had been the most tense of her career. The night was long and anxious for Sophia. She went over every detail, every word, preparing for the next day. Elena, for her part, spent the night in her cell, but with a new light of hope in her eyes, one she hadn't seen in months. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. News of the twist had spread like wildfire, and everyone wanted to witness the outcome. The tension was palpable. An almost religious silence hung in the air as Judge Vasconcelos entered and took her seat. "The court is in session," she declared, her voice serious. "We are here to hear the results of the forensic analysis of the new evidence presented by the defense. A forensic technician, a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious demeanor, was called to the witness stand. He swore to tell the truth, and Sophia felt her heart pound in her chest. "Mr. Expert," the judge began, "the court would like to know the results of your analysis of the diary and the digital recording device." The expert adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, we analyzed the diary. The predominant fingerprints found on the pages and cover belonged to Marcos Dantas. The handwriting was compared with known samples of his writing and confirmed as authentic. The diary's content details an elaborate plan to fake his own death, incriminate his wife, Elena Dantas, and flee the country to escape debts with a cartel. He describes choosing an isolated location in the forest to simulate his disappearance and hide the briefcase with the incriminating evidence." A murmur of shock ran through the room. Prosecutor Mendez was pale, his eyes fixed on the expert. "And what about the recording device?" the judge asked, her voice maintaining calm but with a note of gravity. "The digital recording contained a single audio file," the expert continued. "Spectrographic analysis of the voice confirmed with 99.9% certainty that the voice belongs to Marcos Dantas. In the recording, he details the plan exactly as described in the diary, including his intention to use Elena's Black Widow reputation to lend credibility to the hoax. He mentions his intent to reappear years later, once the dust settled, and live off the money he had embezzled." The silence in the room was deafening. Elena sobbed, covering her mouth with her hands, tears of relief and pain streaming freely. The jury seemed stunned. "Dr. Mendez, any questions for the witness?" the judge asked, her voice now colder. The prosecutor stood up, visibly shaken. "No, Your Honor," he stammered, his voice failing him. Defeat was etched on his face. "Dr. Almeida?" "No, Your Honor. The defense is satisfied," Sophia replied, a knot in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Expert." "You may step down," the judge instructed. She looked at the jury, then at Sophia, and finally at Elena. Her eyes, once so implacable, now carried an expression of deep seriousness and perhaps a touch of compassion. In light of the irrefutable evidence presented by the defense and corroborated by forensic analysis, the court can no longer sustain the charges against Elena Dantas, the judge declared, her voice resonating with authority. Marcos Dantas was not murdered. He faked his own death and attempted to incriminate his wife. The charges of concealment of a body and murder are therefore unfounded. She banged the gavel one last time, a sound that sealed the case's fate. The court declares Elena Dantas innocent of all charges. She is free. The room erupted. Cries of surprise, relief, and indignation filled the air. Reporters crowded around, cameras flashing. Sophia rushed to Elena, who collapsed into her arms, crying uncontrollably. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a liberation that had seemed impossible moments before. "You're free, Elena," Sophia whispered, hugging her tightly. "You're free." Gabriel approached, a genuine smile on his face. He extended his hand to Elena. "Congratulations, Elena. The truth always finds a way." As Elena was escorted out of the courtroom, a free woman for the first time in months, Sophia looked towards the window. There, perched on the windowsill, was the raven. Its black, intelligent eyes seemed to meet hers for an instant. It tilted its head as if in a farewell nod, and then spread its dark wings, flying into the blue sky, disappearing into the vastness. Sophia smiled. Justice had been served, and a raven had been her most improbable ally. That day marked not only the end of a trial, but the beginning of a new understanding of the mysterious ways in which truth can manifest.